I've never had this level of clarity, um, level of confidence, and level of like calm striving. There's a lot more that I see myself accomplishing and different goals and whatnot.
Yo, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety. I'm your host, as always, Ray Donovan, and I'm looking forward to getting into today's episode. We got a brother with us that I've been following for some time. He's super motivational, and he'll talk a little bit about why he is that motivational man that he is. But from the outside looking in, he wears a ton of hats. And for a guy, and if you watch this on YouTube, you see I love wearing hats. That was just a really bad joke, but in any case, we got Miles Orman with us today. Miles, without further ado, welcome to the Stacking Days podcast.
Great, how's it going, man? I appreciate you having me on. It's really an honor and a privilege. Just to have a platform to share my story and hopefully, inspire anyone who listens to this who might relate to any of the stuff that we touch on today.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's been a little bit of time coming, so I'm glad that we're able to find the time. Without, kind of getting too far into it, let's just start at the beginning. Being that this is a podcast all about relationships with alcohol and how we've breaking free from those relationships. Tell me about how your relationship with alcohol started all the way to the beginning of the story. What was kind of like your why?
Yeah, I'd say my relationship with alcohol started from watching my mother's relationship with alcohol. So, growing up, she actually struggled with alcohol abuse and addiction. And it was something that caused a lot of turmoil and chaos and just a very unsettling environment growing up. Um, she was doing the best that she could, at the time, but that was her coping mechanism. And from how I saw the effects of alcohol on her when I was younger, it was like off the table for me. I never had the desire to drink in high school or anything when I was younger, just because I saw what it was doing at home. And luckily, when I was going into high school, I was very focused on basketball and getting a Division I scholarship. So I had my sights set on that. So it really helped me to kind of just focus and not even think about partying or drinking or too much socializing. But when I finally did make it to college and I got the scholarship and I was exposed to the overwhelm of the party scene and how binge drinking was just like the norm, I was thrown right into it. And I kind of lost focus on what my true like dream and whatnot was at that point. And so the partying and the drinking became part of my focus. And from not really having any other relationship with alcohol outside of just binging, that's just what I did. And it really affected my performance on the court. It affected, my grades. I barely graduated on time. My last semester as a senior, when people were taking like the electives to kind of just chill and, taking a golf class or something, like I'm really, taking 20, 21 credits. Like, yeah, I'm going hard just to graduate on time just because, I did lose focus and, the pressures of being in college and wanting to fit in and kind of do things that weren't necessarily what I was used to, but really just kind of falling into the habit and the routine of that type of a lifestyle.
I mean, I would imagine coming into college as a D1 athlete, you're also just, exposed to a level of partying that maybe like the average college kid, isn't really getting into. You're on a pedestal. Folks are watching you every week. I don't know how tall you are, but I'm assuming if you're a ball player, you stand out on campus when you're walking around. How did you kind of reconcile those two things? Like you're the athlete, you're the D1 guy, and on the side, you're also just still trying to fit in. You're like a normal kid. How did you kind of reconcile those two things? It sounds like you weren't trying to cover up a whole lot. You just kind of like lost track of where you were and who you were, in this very new environment that you found yourself in college.
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with, not having an identity that I was like firm in outside of basketball.
Mm,
So, when I was on the court, I felt comfortable with something that I was good at. I spent a lot of time practicing and getting better at the craft and whatnot. But outside of that arena, when I was out at parties or even walking around campus, I was more of an introverted kind of shy person. Um, especially when I was in an environment where I didn't feel like safe.
mm,
It took me a while to feel comfortable around people to open myself up. And I realized that if I could have a couple of drinks in me, it was a lot easier just to kind of ease that pressure or that anxiety. There was always a worry about not fitting in and how I was being judged at times. The
mhm.
school that I went to was predominantly white, and as you said, like being a basketball player, I'm 6'5", so I walk into a room typically like I'm standing out for various reasons, and it was just one of those things where I wasn't comfortable in my own skin if I'm being honest. Um,
Yeah.
and it's surprising because, from the outside looking in, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that. I even did like improvisational, sketch comedy, like on campus and those type of things. So
Mm,
it's one of those things where people looking at you don't really know exactly what's going on internally. But just really being insecure in a lot of different ways. And, alcohol was just the way to kind of to numb all that.
no, no, I get it totally. Did you at any point over the course of your time in college, whether it be, and it may be being a little bit evidence based, where like your play performance is struggling, your grades are starting to struggle. Did you to look at alcohol and say this is probably the driver behind why my play isn't where it should be, or why my grades aren't where they should be, or why I'm literally taking this thing down to the wire, in my last semester, is because of the drinking? Or was it not that acute? Was it kind of just like, I've been out partying too much, or this, that, and the next? Like, what was the dialogue that was going in your mind? Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, did you think your behavior was problematic at the time, or did you think that you were managing as best as you could, and you saw that there was a departure at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think I recognized in a way that it was affecting my performance on the court and in the classroom, but it was also the norm. So, it wasn't like I was drinking in excess to a lot of the guys on the team. Like we all kind of drank in similar fashions, so give or take a few people that were on the team. So it was just a part of the culture that I was in.
Yeah.
And it was affecting my ability to focus on getting better so that,
Hmm.
I could earn my stripes and kind of get more playing time and those kind of things. And so various things happened with, the coach that recruited me. He wound up getting fired after my freshman year. A new coach came in, kind of had a different vision for the team, brought in some new guys. And part of me dealing with like feeling as though I didn't have as much of an opportunity to play was just like, well, screw it. I'll do what I got to do. I'll be on the team. I'll practice, but I'm not really things aren't going to turn out the way that I want to. So I might as well just have fun and
Right.
still be the basketball player was kind of my
Gotcha.
mentality.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good way to deflect the pain of like maybe diminish playing time, and like, screw it. I don't need. I'm just gonna take this college experience for what I can. I get it.
Right.
So let's fast forward a little bit now. So you've graduated, you've exited school, and you're now in the quote unquote real world. What did life look like for you then? I'm assuming your behavior around alcohol maybe changed somewhat. Uh, but did you stop shortly thereafter? Or like, what was your process like after getting out of school?
Yeah. After getting out of school, it kind of just kept up, um, in the same manner, again, like a lot of binge drinking. I would go out and party on the weekends. I went back to live at home with my parents for a while, and I was trying to figure out my place in the world. For so long, I identified as this athlete. Playing career was over, and I was in the real world. Got a 9 to 5 doing a sales gig after a few months of being back home. Trying to find my way with that, but not really being like satisfied or happy. And again, just being at that age where partying was kind of the norm around the social circles that I was around. So it didn't look too crazy for me. Um, but I started to have these situations, you know, where I would go out on the weekend, and I was living in Jersey at this time. So we would party in the city, go out into Manhattan. One of my buddies used to live in Soho. So we were around that area. And there'd be these nights where we all go out to the bar and I'd be drinking all night. And then I'd wind up back at his place the next morning, like, and not recall, you know, bits and pieces of the night before. Um, you know, one time I got so drunk that I passed out outside of a bodega, you know, and woke up in the morning, you know, like not knowing what had happened. I had to walk like 100 blocks because my cell phone back at the time when we had like the flip phones and whatnot, the battery died. I
Hmm.
didn't have any money. I couldn't communicate with anybody, and so I just had to walk back to his place. And so just like situations like that, like this isn't normal, man. But
Yeah.
it was just a habit, a lifestyle that just kept going on for a while. Um, and it really just ramped up as I was struggling to find my place. I was still doing work that I didn't enjoy. And in 2012, I wound up hurting my back pretty bad. A couple slip discs, degeneration of my discs and some bulging. And
Hmm.
at that point, like I had a very difficult time walking around. I couldn't sit down in a chair comfortably. And so I went to a doctor and, you know, he kind of, and it's my own fault because I got one opinion and he told me that, you know, my athletic days were pretty much behind me. I wouldn't be able to lift weights anymore. Like most of my activity would have to come in the form of just like walking and those kind of things. So psychologically that took a huge toll on me because so much of my expression in my life was through movement, through my body, through expressing this type of, you know, athleticism or power.
Hmm.
And, um, so it was a tough pill to swallow. And then speaking of pills, that was the first time that I was really exposed to painkillers because I was in such, you know, pain, so much pain from the injury. I just got prescribed some painkillers, and I started taking those on a regular basis and mixing them with the drinking. And so now I had that combination working on the back end. Um, but meanwhile, I was still able to keep a job. You know, by this time I'm married. I have a daughter. She's probably, you know, around that time, like 2 or 3. And it was the pressures of life that were just really weighing me down. Still not happy with what I was doing with my life. The challenges of being newly married, of raising a daughter now, and is trying to figure things out. I just really started to check out and try to numb through the alcohol consumption, and now through the pills, and you know that you know slowly started to ramp up into other substances as well.
So did you make a transition at that time? Obviously, you were binge drinking in college, but now it sounds like this was more like a daily medication for you, almost, where, or maybe not daily, but how did your behavior around the frequency change as you were starting to use it to cope with life versus the party scene that you were part of in college?
Yeah, I think the coping at that point was still more on a social, you know, it's Friday night, Thursday night, we're going out, let's hang out, you know. It didn't start to become a daily consumption until maybe like 2014, a couple years later. And
Hmm.
what happened at this point is we moved. So we were having a hard time maintaining where we were living. We decided to move to a neighborhood that was less expensive. It was in a low income area. So, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with New Jersey, but Newark, New Jersey, there was an
Yeah.
area where um, it was really underdeveloped. There were a lot of like warehouses, and the area was just it was so different from what I was used to because I grew up in the suburbs. My dad, my mom, you know, they did well for themselves. And now, you know, right out my front door, there are people dealing drugs, there's prostitution, you know, there's abandoned buildings. And being in that environment really took a toll on me.
Yeah.
And one of my neighbors, because we lived in a 2 family home, one of my neighbors who was a little bit younger than me, we kind of sparked up, built a friendship, and it all revolved around drinking. And so now I had a drinking buddy that like lived right downstairs from me.
Right.
And so that's where the drinking really became more of a daily thing because when I got home from work, now I have this friend who's right here. I can just hit up. We have a couple of beers and, it just kind of turned into like a daily habit at that point.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, that's tough, man. When you know, obviously anyone who has got to live in that environment is challenging. You know, whether you grew up in that environment, whether you transplant plant into that type of environment. I mean, it's not healthy for anyone. I think that's a huge problem in our community, broadly speaking. But
Right.
um, where's your wife in all this? So, you know, you all are obviously dealing with a lot of these challenges together. You know, where is she in the story? Is she a drinker as well? It sounds like she wasn't your drinking buddy necessarily. But how where does she show up in the story?
Yeah, we definitely, we did a lot of partying together. It's kind of like what we did when we first
Okay.
got together for many years. And that was, something that we just felt, connected on, her, her thing was never really drinking though. She drank socially and then she could just the next day cut it off.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was never like that. Once, one night we went out, the next day I would feel sluggish, have a hangover, kind of just say, screw it, let's start the day and, have a couple of drinks just to feel better. But, we definitely, did a lot of partying and socializing together. Um, she later on did partake in some other, partying with me with different substances. And, you know, when I was, going through the drinking and then the pills and those kind of things, that kind of translated into, I was exposed to ecstasy and then Molly and those kind of things. Um, it's funny because it really came across my radar through the music that was popular at that time. So a
Mm,
lot of like trap music started coming out around there, and there was a lot of references to drugs and specifically Molly.
yeah.
And so it was just like in my field of awareness. And so I started to seek that out. And it was something that I found myself like really enjoying because of how low I felt and how like almost like a depressed state because of obviously alcohol is a depressant. So it's doing that to you on a physiological level. But, when I was taking ecstasy at that point in my life, it just made me feel good about things that I shouldn't feel good about normally. You know what I mean? And so I got hooked on that for a couple of years. And, that was something that we shared, together. That was, we would look forward to weekends where we would just, hang out at home, listen to some music, have some drinks and take some pills. And, it's crazy to think back at it at this point now, like coming so far from that, but that was my life. Like I just
Mm,
looked forward to the weekends of escaping because I was so, I just hated where I was in life at that time. And that was really the only thing that I had to look forward to.
yeah. I get it. It's interesting you mentioned ecstasy. I remember there was a point in my life where I think I had probably started recognizing that, you know, I was drinking was a you know, a part of my experience, and I was always so fearful of trying new drugs. Like, I remember I had a buddy of mine in college, and he was doing ecstasy at the time, and he offered me some, and I was just like vehemently like, absolutely not, because I'm afraid that if I touch that thing, I'm never coming back. I'm never coming back from that thing. So like I was pretty diligent when it came to just sticking to alcohol, but I could see how, you know, when you're in a place and you're not, you know, really, you know, feeling good about where your life is. And I'm surprised because at that point in time, I wasn't really happy with where my life was either, where, you know, you're not willing you know, to try some new things to lighten the load, so to speak, on, you know, your reality. So I totally get that. Sounds like you and your wife have been together for a while too, so I'm sure you have a lot of shared experiences, and sounds as though that she's able to kind of turn it off in a way that you haven't, and that's probably a good thing for the both of you guys, that she was, you know, stronger in that regard at least.
Yeah, definitely. She has really been supportive over the last couple of years of my journey, through my drinking, and the fact that it was never a thing for her made it that much easier. Like I wonder how things would have turned out if there was that resistance where we were both of the same vibe when it came to alcohol and those kind of things. So, I really do appreciate her for just being by my side through these transitions and allowing me the space to grow and, seeing me at, places where I wasn't at my best, but knowing that deep down, um, I'll be able to kind of get through things and work through things. And yeah, man, we're going on 16 years together. We're going to be 14 years married, this September. So, she's my best friend. She's my ride or die.
Congratulations to both of you. That's a
Thank you, man.
significant amount of time. I've been with my wife now for almost the exact same amount of time, and that's not insignificant. You've been through some
That-
stuff together if you if you've been together for that long. Um, so walk me through kind of where you found the exit on the highway. What led up to it, and then what did you do in order to right some of the behavior, the activities that you were involved in that you felt, I'm assuming wasn't serving you anymore.
yeah. So the catalyst to it all was in 2016, we decided to relocate. And so again, this was where at that point we were living in the neighborhood that I was telling you about. And so much of, I think, the way that I was acting had to do with my environment. Right. And so on a subconscious level, I think I knew that in order for me to start to work on myself and work through all of these problems that I was dealing with, I needed to shake things up, in a intense way. And my wife, she grew up in Florida. And so, she spent time down in Florida and in Jersey with both of her parents. And she always had mentioned wanting to come back and live down here. And it was something I was just opposed to because my entire family was up north, all my friends and whatnot. Um, but after my son was born, he was born, in January of 2016. We kind of just said it might be nice for us to kind of just start over. We have a family now. We've had a family, but like family's growing, and Florida sounds like a good place to raise a family. Maybe the cost of living might be a little bit less, so let's try that out. And I was open to it, and it was the big disruptor that I needed. I had to start over. I had to spend a lot of time by myself, a lot of time just looking in the mirror and kind of taking stock of what's been going on. And, something that I would say over all of the years that I was struggling with the drinking and the drugging, I still had one foot in the personal development world. I've always been fascinated about human potential, about what's possible when you don't put limits on yourself. And so, even through athletic pursuits and those kind of things, I was able to get a taste of that, of what it would look like if you apply discipline towards a goal, towards something that you want to work for and manifest. And so I was able to see that at like a pretty significant level. But as the drinking and those kind of things started to take over more of my time, I forgot what that was like. And so with me relocating to Florida and having to kind of spend a lot of time by myself, I started to put more and more time into the personal development world. I've listened to thousands of hours of podcasts. I love reading books and consuming audiobooks and those kind of things. So, there's something to be said about I was doing something on a mental level and a subconscious level with how I was programming myself, even though I was still acting out in certain ways when it came to the habits of drinking. And I started to read more Quit Lit around that time. And then I started to listen to more podcasts about sobriety and about recovery. And this is over the span of probably 4 years. So the big shift didn't happen for me until right before 2020, let's say. There's a podcast called Recovery Elevator. I don't know if you're
Mm.
familiar with it.
That was the
And
first one I probably listened to with Paul Churchill.
yeah,
Yeah.
Paul Churchill. Yeah, it changed my life. And I really just started listening to that podcast. And I loved it because you started to hear stories of people that you could relate to, people talking about these down points and their drinking, and the things that they're ashamed of, right? The hiding, the lying, the sneaking things around. And you're like, wow, for the first time, I started to realize like, this wasn't something that I necessarily needed to be ashamed of. There's other people that have gone through these type of things.
Yeah.
And there was something about AA that never resonated with me. So I never really found myself at an AA meeting leading up to this point. So the aspect of community and reaching out for support was fairly new to me. And so this is the first time that I started to take that on as an option. And so Recovery Elevator has a private Facebook community for people who want additional support. And so I signed up for that and I started to share my story and I started to hear other people's story on a personal level. And that's where like the shift really started to happen. I was able to pick up different tools and try things on. And, I would have a month here and there where I didn't drink and then, I'd have a step back and, that kind of played on for the next couple of years. Um, but if there was one big thing that shifted it all for me, I would say it's two things. It was moving to Florida and then actually reaching out for support through the communities like Recovery Elevator. There's another one that I'm a fan of. Is 1 Year No Beer. They have a great community.
Okay.
Um,
That's like
so those
UK
two things.
based, right? Did that originate? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, No, I mean, I love that. It's interesting because you have some folks who will say that and you probably I know we both heard this on the recovery elevator that the geographic relocation is never the cure, right? It seems like you were able
Right.
you were able to spin it, make it work for you. But I think that the podcast piece is huge. Like that was a huge part of my story, and even though and this is also in the midst of the pandemic, I had just moved to Colorado and didn't really have a huge community of in real life people to reach out and, for support. So I almost use these podcasts as like my community, my imaginary community, that I would tap into. So I never joined. I think it's Cafe RE
Right.
is the community online. I never joined Cafe RE, but I mean, I listen to the podcast every Monday and and also others that came out over the course of the week, and that was my way also of just kind of keeping myself accountable to to just being in the mind space of of trying to unlock this piece of myself. And I always say to people, like, don't wait until the day that you're going to try to move away from alcohol to start doing the work. And like it sounds like for you, you'd been listening to this stuff for and reading for 4 years before you got to a point where you were able to string some things together successfully for yourself. And I think that's good because you want to lay that primer, you want to lay that foundation for yourself and program yourself, like you said, so that you can be successful. I think it's really hard. And I mean, I've talked to people who have gone cold turkey and like turned it on and off like overnight. And I just wasn't a person that could do that. There was so much that I had needed to unravel and unpack before I could make that call and then ultimately be moderately successful in those early days. So congratulations in finding your way to sobriety, even through some probably unconventional means that I'm sure before Recovery Elevator and some of these other, like, you didn't even know it could exist for you.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackndays.com. That's stackndays.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation.
So talk to me about your kind of early sobriety. You've now strung together days. You're living a healthier lifestyle. You're probably sounds like you're back in the headspace of just holistic personal development. I know that at a certain point you transitioned that outwardly and became a personal coach. So like, what does your life look like, in those early days leading up to where you are today from the standpoint of your own evolution? And what tools do you use to continue to stay on the track that you've, been very explicit in being your core?
Yeah. Definitely. It's a lot of messing up and then recalibrating, right? Like trying out different tools. Um, One thing that was paramount to me, because I've always been interested in health and wellness as well, and trying to figure out what you can do. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Like you're a binge drinker for so many years, but then you care so much about health and wellness. It's like I was fascinated about what what we put in our bodies can do as far as our performance and how we feel. And back in it was 2018, I got certified as a nutrition coach. So that was my first exposure into coaching. It was in the realm of teaching people or coaching people about nutrition. And so I did that for a little bit. And as much as I liked it, I knew that I wanted to work with people on more than just what they ate. And so taking a more holistic approach to overall wellness and mindset. And so that was in the back of my mind. And there was the imposter syndrome that was still showing up for me in the early days of working, through recovery, because here I am teaching you how to be a better version of yourself. We're doing I'm talking to you about all these different things on how to eat and whatnot, but I'm still drinking, a lot on the weekends, and I'm partying. And, in the first couple of years, I was still using other substances when I moved down here. And so it took me a while to actually, um, get to a point where I could be in integrity with what I was talking about. That was important to me because I never want to suggest that anyone does something that I haven't done myself. So I needed to prove to myself that I could make these changes, and I was about the lifestyle that I was promoting. And initially there was a lot of like struggle. I understood that I had to rebuild my body. So along the years, I put on like 60 pounds of added weight just from, um, really believing in the diagnosis that I got as far as my back and not being able to recover from that. And a quick sidebar, like I was a huge wrestling fan growing up. And so I don't know if you're familiar with DDP, Diamond Dallas
Yeah,
Page.
yeah.
So his, yeah. So Diamond Dallas Page has this yoga program. It's called DDP Yoga, and it came
I
across
see
my
that.
radar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really cool because at the time where I started to dive into working some of the recovery stuff, he was actually promoting it about how he helped Jake the Snake Roberts overcome
Mm,
addiction, and how he was sober, and he rebuilt his body from the ground up from this. And so I think it was right around like 2019, I started diving into DDP yoga and working on like trying to rebuild my lower back and working on mobility and flexibility and those things. And I started to see some changes in how I was feeling. And so over some time, like I really started to feel the difference in my body. And I was like, all right, well, if I could get to this point, what would happen if I started to really dedicate myself and figuring out how I could get stronger and how I can work on my mobility even more. And so I started working with an online trainer at that point. His name's BJ Gador. Shout out to BJ Gador. Um, I think that really reconnected me to that athlete that was laying dormant inside of me for so long. I finally had something where I could put all my focus and my attention into like this disciplined approach towards physical fitness again. And I was starting to gain confidence, right? And along the way, I'm learning about breath work, and I'm learning more about meditation, and I'm taking that on and seeing some of the results from having these tools and things that I can utilize as opposed to relying on the drinking.
right.
And so I just, I did a lot of reflecting and spent a lot of time with myself trying to process through what was it that had me running back to the bottle, back to the substances. And it was just for so long, I didn't feel good in my body. I didn't feel good in the way that I was expressing my gift. I didn't have anything to contribute to the world at the level that I wanted to. And so when I started to do that little by little and seeing the results from the effort that I was putting in, whether it was my physical fitness, whether it was, seeing how meditation became easier and something that I look to enjoy, I started to share content online and open up about my story and to see that other people resonated with it. And I was like, wow, I'm doing the things that were done for me to get me to this point. I like this. Let me continue to do this. And so that changed my approach with what I wanted to do with coaching. And, over the years, I just kind of started to create my own like philosophy and framework. And it's really just helping people get to a point of clarity and understanding using certain processes in their daily life, creating habits and routines and rituals around mindfulness, around cultivating more self awareness, and around expressing creativity in your own unique way.
Mm.
Um, I think creativity is such a huge part of where I am today because for many years, I didn't have the outlet to express my creativity. And so that comes with the athleticism. It came with basketball and it was gone for a while. It came with, doing, the improvisational stuff in college. So I used to always have these creative outlets and I lost them. And so to finally tap back into that through social media and creating content and creating programs and working with people one on one, it just helped me to kind of formulate more of a purpose driven life at this point. And, I hope that answers the question that you asked because I kind of went off on a
You,
tangent.
no, you got it. You you got it. I appreciate it, and I oftentimes I ask questions just to, to pique one's ability to just go there. You know what I mean? And like so, I sometimes just get lost in listening to the responses. So I appreciate you kind of laying out how you got into where you've gotten. I have a question for you because like a lot of people when they're trying to pursue betterment, whether it's on the back of a substance or whether it's just kind of doing the quote unquote work, they'll turn towards like a traditional therapist versus a personal coach, so to speak. I know that there are probably some overlaps and some similarities between the two, but where does one world in your eyes end and the next world begin from the standpoint of therapy versus the personal coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people have it. There are a lot of similarities and things that overlap. I feel because I actually have a personal therapist that I go to and these are conversations that we've had, but in my experience, therapy deals a lot with the past and trying to work through, past experiences and traumas and kind of stay in the past in a sense,
Hmm.
where coaching is a lot more future oriented. It's what are we working towards? What are some of the goals that you have that you're um, limiting yourself from, exploring? Let's work
Hmm.
on how we can get you there, as opposed to let's go back into the past, uproot some things, kind of work on the healing that's required to maybe work through traumas and those kind of things. Um, and that's not to say that that doesn't get touched on with coaching, but it's just in my personal experience, coaching has a lot more to do with the future as opposed to the past.
I think that's a pretty clear and understandable model for the layman to understand. I think that's great. Thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
Speaking of the past, and this is a little bit of a deviation from the conversation, going back to something that you talked about early, almost at the beginning of the episode. Your mother, right? And the fact that that she had her own problematic relationship with alcohol. Was that something you were ever able to kind of revisit in your more mature years after you've had your own experience? Or is that something that you kind of just had to leave where it was, for you at least in the past?
Yeah, it's I definitely have had to re-experience it, and there's still a lot to kind of work through. I have so much more compassion
Yeah.
and understanding for my mother at this point, um, because I know if she if she knew a better way, like if she really understood the better way of dealing with her pain and dealing with whatever it is that she's trying to escape from, I believe that she would utilize a different method. Uh, but unfortunately, she's never gotten to that place, and it has affected our relationship. We don't have the type of relationship that in my heart, I wish we would. There is a void when it comes to the relationship that I have with my mother, and it makes me sad, that she wasn't able to get the help that she needed, and there was a lot of a life that she wasn't able to live or has not been able to live because of, um, being stuck in the past and those kind of things, and just, not having the belief that things could change and the right resources and the willingness to do the work, right? You have to be willing to do the work and kind of take accountability for the life that you create. And, unfortunately, she hasn't really been able to do that. Um, but yeah, I view a lot of my memories and experiences in childhood from a different point now, having now being a parent myself, and also, being on the other end of addiction. I know she intentionally didn't do the things that she did in the past to hurt me and those kind of things, but, there is a level of accountability that you need to have, in order to work through these kind of things.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And thanks for being, for being forthcoming and sharing that. I know that, whenever, at least for me, when I talk about my parents and, it's never easy, and I was chatting with someone earlier today, uh, along similar lines, right? Where, we have an opportunity as parents who've kind of gone through our own journey to, I guess, for lack of a better term, use the cliche, to break the cycle, right? And to evolve our children in a way that maybe we didn't have that opportunity in our come up, and it's just so difficult to reach back and pull the parent up. You know what I mean? So I hear you, I feel you on that 100%. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Couple questions that I have as we kind of take this plane in here. One is, when you were in your darkest days, and maybe this is right before you left Jersey, before you got to Florida, maybe right when you got to Florida, you're trying to figure things out. How would someone have known that you were struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them so?
Uh, that's the thing. I was very high functioning, like, um, I don't think anyone would have noticed outside of my immediate circle with my wife and then, a couple of my friends who saw me. I wasn't open publicly, sharing anything online at that time. I don't think anybody would know, honestly, unless we had a conversation one night when I blacked out, and then I saw you the next day and I was just looking at you like, I don't even remember seeing you the night before.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a telltale sign.
Outside of that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, man, that was part of the problem in a sense. I was very high functioning. So I was still able to do pretty well at most of the jobs that I've had. But just not get to that next level that deep down, like I said, I've always had this affinity for, human potential and just trying to figure out like, how can you get better? What's possible? Um, so having that kind of a mentality along with, the substance abuse issues, like I was still able to kind of post by and most people didn't know.
yeah, I get it. I mean, there's no right answer to that question either. I ask everyone because I think it's so important to recognize that there is a gamut of where someone sits on any spectrum, right? And just because you are struggling doesn't mean that someone's going to be able to see it, and that isn't the case necessarily for the person who's standing right next to you. They might have a very different answer to that question, and we're here to help. So I appreciate that. Next question I have is, for someone who's sitting there and, maybe they've just made their Florida move, right? Maybe, they're looking at the fact that they're growing their family, or, there's a bunch in life that they want to accomplish that they feel like they're holding themselves back, and alcohol or something of that ilk is the issue. But they don't know what the first step is. They don't know what they should do in order to start pursuing a better life. What would you suggest to that person?
Yeah, I think reaching out to someone for support and letting them know what's going on, finding some type of, community, whether in person or nowadays, there's so many alternatives online. Um, I think having that reassurance that you're not alone is so important in this process, because for most of the time you do feel like you're alone when you're in your head and thinking about all the regrets and those type of things. Um, So being able to find a safe place where you can express what's going on and have the encouragement and the hope that things can change. You need the example. You need examples of people who were able to overcome the things that you're working through and to show you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So first and foremost, I think it is once you have the understanding that there is an issue there, reach out and find some type of support.
Yeah. Miles, have you gotten to a place in your life where you're starting to feel that fulfillment that you had been seeking for all those years?
Yeah, man. I was just telling my wife, like a week or two ago, like I've never, even when I was playing basketball, right? Cause I'm wiser. I have more experience. I've worked through more problems. I've never had this level of clarity, um, level of confidence and level of like calm striving. Like there's a lot more that I see myself accomplishing and different goals and whatnot, but it's like I, everything is connected as far as how the process goes with, um, being patient and working through things. Like I feel as if you have examples of when you were patient and persistent and you showed up and you just took action and you just kept going. It's one of the things I always talk about is keep going and keep growing. Like I've proven to myself that I'm a person of my word. I've proven to myself that I'm disciplined. And I'm proving to myself that if there's something in my mind that I want to create, whether it's something, with my body or I envision myself doing a movement and an exercise that I can't do. And then a year down the line, like, I'm finally doing that. Or I have this idea of creating a business or becoming a mindset coach and I do it, or an idea of creating content or, now I'm working on writing and this vision of finally getting to a place where alcohol doesn't have a hold on me. You just have all these vantage points and all these reference points where you're like, everything's going to be all right, man. Just keep going. Just keep growing. Like things will work out. And it's a really cool place to be in. It's not to say that there are not going to be more challenges. There's not going to be more problems. Um, but I just have this reassurance where, um, I truly believe everything is unfolding the way that it should. Um, the meditation and the mindfulness is a huge part of my life. And I've gotten really good at listening to my intuition, looking forward to that place of solitude and silence. Like there's so many downloads that you can access. And it's like a, it's like a juicy, like, I don't know. There's just a lot to love about connecting to source or to God or to the universe, whatever your language is, whatever you get with. There's something more powerful than you that is assisting you along this life. And it feels good to be able to tap into that if you build in these habits and these routines to do that on a consistent basis.
I love I love the sound of that. And even though we are for the most part perfect strangers, I love for you that you're in this space that you're in right now. I think that's fantastic, man. So congratulations to you. Where can folks find you, Miles?
Yeah, I spend a lot of my time on Instagram. I mess around on Facebook and TikTok here and there, but I post consistently on Instagram. Right now, I'm working on a weekly newsletter that I plan on launching in the second quarter of the year. Uh, uh, what it's going to be called Mindful Observations. I was just working on that. I'm going to transition that into a podcast and a YouTube channel for an audio and video version. I just want to be able to discuss and explore the topics that I share short form on Instagram and more of a long form manner so there can be more depth to the conversation. And yeah, it's Miles Orman on Instagram, and that's where you can find me for the most part.
Cool. Well, for the listeners, if you're not following Miles yet, go give him a follow. Go check him out. The brother is extremely motivating, as you can tell by this conversation. But from what I can tell, just an all around good person. So, Miles, look, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for spending some time with me here on Stacking Days.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on, Ray. Thank you.
You got it. You got it. Talk to y'all next time. Be well.
I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.